What's going on, guys? It's the Money Talk Show with Dane, where we talk about all sorts of interesting topics having to do with money, specifically real estate and crypto here. So, if those are topics that you like, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel. We've got all sorts of just incredible content coming your way, incredible guests, just like the one that we have on today. And we're doing our best to be able to help be the bridge between entrepreneurs, real estate people, and crypto, because the best opportunity, or one of the best opportunities in our opinion, to get involved in crypto is right now. So we appreciate you being on the show. As you're tuning in, make sure that you comment below where you're tuning in from. We love to see where all you guys are tuning in from. We can it helps the algorithm, all that type of stuff. So welcome, Corey. Go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, Corey Geary here, and just like yourself, man, just been rocking and rolling real estate for the last 7 years, and just kind of making the transition into the crypto space for the last about a year and a half, and really just absorbing myself inside this space, learning everything I possibly can. And hopefully I could take a lot of friends with us, a lot of real estate guys. Hopefully we can bridge that gap for them, educate them. And then, yeah, man, I just think we're at the perfect time. I mean, there's no better time, in my opinion, with the Bitcoin halving coming, with the presidential election coming, I guarantee the economy is going to turn around at some point. They can't raise interest rates forever. It's just, man, it's super bullish, and I'm super excited. So thanks, man. Glad to be here.
We've got an excellent guest on today. Funding Jim is one of the most prominent people in the Richard Heart ecosystems that we love so much. And so we're humbled to have him on today. He's done a lot of real estate investing. And I think today is going to be an excellent opportunity for those of you that are tuning in that have a real estate background, or have interest there and also have interest in crypto. You'll be able to see how the two worlds kind of fit together today. So that Funding Jim, welcome. I would love to hear a little bit more about you. In fact, specifically, let's probably start today with how you got into real estate, how you got into crypto, kind of your background.
Before in the green room, I was commenting a little bit.
Yeah,
People heard my stories. My stories are basically a conglomerate at this age, this phase of my life, of 4 different people. I am 4 different people. And I mean that by the culture and the norms that I was raised in. Was farming Northeast Texas. You get through the winter, you have a profit whenever you reap a crop, or if you're in the cattle business, you have your livestock growth, right? You're like, okay, here's my investment, here's the equipment and hardware I need, here's the acreage, here's my labor investment, what's my ROI, right? And that was my life maybe until 15 or so. Then I think of that nostalgically, and I also put it in context when it comes to currency or ROI on time, and storage of labor and store of value kind of narratives. Like, what's your fallback position? The calories you can eat, the shelter that you have, the security that you can defend whatever property rights you choose to, right? So like that's my conservative background. And then my second chapter basically is truthfully socialist, and socialism in the form of military. Military is that you have a certain uniform, you're very similar in your boot camp, you go through a process, basically where you're indoctrinated into a way of thinking, and the way of thinking serves the need of a nation to either defend itself, which is a popular narrative, or to oppress others, which is not so popular, but in truth, in my view, from this point, the way the world works. We're always looking for resources, and if those resources are to gather labor for low cost to produce goods and services that we desire to consume, then we're going to set up systems for that. It just happens to be at the moment that America is very dominant in this harvesting of labor. And we do that, I've learned over time, or at least my bias leads me to believe that we have, exporting of our inflation to other nations. We basically have a low labor cost and resource cost that we import, but we are doing that through some monetary policies. It seems that we frame it in a certain way to be politically and popularly appetizing, but that's really I realize I am a Roman in Rome, in the history of Rome. So like, that's my viewpoint now. But the second chapter was basically 11 years of military life. I was medical, so I didn't have to be a combatant necessarily and super aggressive, but I've been in battlefields. I've seen arms and legs blown off of people, 18 to 22-year-olds, cannon fodder is kind of a phrase. It's very dark, but that's a phrase. And I was through the first Gulf War. So the first Gulf War, Afghanistan, Yemen, a lot of different conflict zones as well. I've been. And then as a volunteer later in life, even in that medical thing, once I got out of the service, at 28, 29 years old. And that was, I guess about 20 or 21 was the first time I bought a house. I think I was 20 years old. First time I bought a house, just a regular residence. And it was from my conservative, save your money, qualified through credit and leverage, things like that. So I always had an interest in like the machine of finance. That was a curiosity to me as a 17-year-old until 20 when I bought my first house. And that was really just to live in. But I bought it with the intention to sell it in the future. I was married, and I had a 5-bedroom, 4-bath house with a 4-car garage. So like, that was far in excess of what I needed as a conservative, just a place to live, low budget necessarily. But I was framing it in a way that I will sell it in the future, 2-3 years, and then I will basically do that lever up game as far as the wealth ladder in real estate. So I liked that frame. I think some of the stuff I first started hearing as an 18 or 19-year-old while still in the military and transitioning into civilian life was Carlton Sheets. It's like these TV programs that would be on and talk about like how you can make a deal as a bird dog, and you could, basically get something under contract and then resell the contract. So that was kind of the first foray into real estate, was Carlton Sheets programs at, midnight on television.
It's one of the OGs. Yeah. Carlton Sheets.
Yeah,
Old school.
Yeah, old school. I even had speculated as a 22 or 23-year-old while I was still in the service, but with friends. Like, I didn't want to do the swinging of the hammer. As a kid, I did a lot of I wouldn't say barn raising. That sounds so nostalgic, but helping friends and neighbors build their house, my grandparents and things like that. I helped them, swing hammers and do, as a 12-year-old, lumber lugging and stuff like that. But what I was getting at is, even my other military friends that wanted to build, make some profit in real estate, I'd be like, okay, I've got the credit access. I can get 0% or very low interest, credit cards. I can cash them out. We can put 30 grand toward the renovation of a house in Jacksonville, Florida, and you can flip it, and then we'll make a profit, 6 months down the road. So that was like my beginning as far as like the real estate thing. But that was still while I was in the military. And then age 29 or 30, I was exposed to very wealthy people from age 20 till 30, because I was married into my ex's family. Were very high up inside of Disney Corporation. So I was around super wealthy people, but I wasn't anywhere close to being a super wealthy guy. I was an E5, which is a rank in the Navy system. And I think I made $1,400 a month, something like that. And I'm around, or at least social, with my ex-wife and her family, with people that are making hundreds of thousands per month. Like, it was a completely different world for me, exposed to that different cultural norm. So I started taking in some of that thought process, and then specialized. I drilled down my medical training to be very specialized. I was always curious to start something every 2 to 3 years as a new challenge. And it wasn't necessarily academics like college, university level. It was more like, I want to understand how MRI works, magnetic resonance imaging, and I want to apply that to the heart, which is something I already knew enough about, or it had started in my medical journey. So I became a specialist in MRI, CT, echocardiography, cardiac catheterization. Anything after that, later in my 30s, this is a 20-something year medical career in cardiology, and anything to do with the heart diagnostics or the tools needed to do repairs. So it wasn't heart surgery as much as it was the mitral valve being replaced, or it wasn't heart transplant that I was involved with on a day-to-day basis. It was the devices like a left ventricular assist device, which is basically a temporary bionic heart, things like that. So that was my curiosity in technology and my curiosity in biology. But I always had like this desire, not so much for money, but for like, can I do it? Like set a goal that's just outside of what I think I can do it, just on the other side, so that when I really accomplish that goal, I'd feel validated, like, oh, I did that. Like I didn't really know I could, but I did, right?
That's one of the things that we found, and one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about, being an investor. Corey and I, with a real estate background, I mean, going to real estate events, it's cool because involving yourself with people like that and other people kind of like you're saying that are doing well for themselves.
Yeah.
Oftentimes the people are doing well for themselves because they're interested in exactly what you just mentioned. They're interested in pushing their upper limits and maxing out their own life. Ed Milet talks about maxing out, and that
one more thing. Yeah. One other thing I wanted to touch on that you really kind of bypass is that by you being in those rooms or around those people who are making hundreds of grand, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month was kind of like one of the triggers that changed your mindset. And that's why like we're big advocates of masterminds, events, coaches, the whole nine, because like being in those rooms is what made me level up in life, and honestly what saved my life, because I was going nowhere, drinking, drugs, and it was completely a destructive path. But chasing the dollar, getting into real estate, and being in rooms like yourself and Dane and people who are just on this journey together, not only for financial gain, that's part of it, but also spiritual, mental, and physical. Man, it's just been a blessing. And so just how you said, when you've been around those type of people, man, it's amazing what it can do for you.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to become a physician, you're going to have a 10 to 12 year journey, to be a specialist in some medical journey. If you want to be a farmer or something like that along those lines as well, you can go out and you can plant the seed because you've heard other people do it, but you're probably going to have a failed crop. Like there's a lot of learning that's real world experience, right?
So it.
Yeah. And it's the same sort of thing when it comes to, if you set out and you look at historically, where have most of the wealth of the planet, if you look over time and multiple cultures and geography and things like that, it's pretty much real estate. Like you can either control it by the tip of a spear and say, I'm a warlord or I'm a dictator and I'm in control, or you can set up some kind of monarchy. Like I think the wealthiest person conversation has happened a bunch of times in the past few years. You always hear about like a Bezos or Gates or Elon Musk, right? Because those are basically versions of stock and derivatives that you calculate. But what is the calculation of politically controlling Russia? Putin's probably more wealthy, even though his pay is different than his political clout or his power. Same sort of thing with the king of Thailand. So the king of Thailand basically controls, it's fascist, meaning that they have a percentage of every business that occurs. So like, what is wealth? If you look at things, it's pretty much control of real estate, being able to either defend it or take it from others. Like we live in a Western society where we're doing it by contract, and by contract, you're making a contract with me to sell. I'm making a contract with you to buy, and I might even involve a third party, whether it's a hard money lender or a bank or something like that. If I don't choose to take, gold doubloons out of a treasure chest and give it to you, like we're making contracts, and all of those contracts are basically, either defended or permitted by government under threat of violence. So like you can be a squatter in my property until you're either removed by contract or, by threat of violence. That's really what enforces contracts,
Right. Absolutely. So, so you bought your first house. It was, you were looking to scale up over time, sell that one and move up the real estate ladder, if you will. Where did things go from there? How'd you end up in as a real estate investor rather than just having somewhere to live?
Yeah, as far as personal residences and things like that, I don't think anything was different other than lever up every so often. I think the first Yeah, the first thing that I did was, as far as actually to cash flow more than where I lived, was 2013. So I don't have a ton of experience. Maybe that's 9 years. And my experience started with converting basically property into special niche use. I lived at the time, I lived 2006 until 2017 in Silicon Valley. And the hospitals I was working at were in the Bay Area around San Francisco. And that has, but one, because of the geography, it's very, and also the political will has been to limit how vertical San Francisco can get. Like, it has a 40-foot limit on how tall it can go, right? So if you have limit as far as there's water surrounding on a peninsula, and you have limits on how tall you can go, and you're not shrinking people to be, 4 inches tall, like, how do you fit more people into the same space? Well, you don't. And all that can change is price. Like, if you choose that you're going to live in Palo Alto, you're going to pay $3 to $4 million for your house at the very minimum. That's the very base, right? You can see $20 to $30 million houses in certain parts of Palo Alto, or San Francisco can be in the 40 to 50 million for residences in Pacific Heights and things like that, right? And that's usually like legacy money. Typically, it's not necessarily nouveau riche. It's more like the Gettys have homes in Pacific Heights and things like that, right? And they might have even done it for tax structure, because there's different reasons why you would buy something that you're just sitting dormant and not even using for residence or rental. But for me, what I cared about was there's two specialties that my real estate portfolio journey has tried to serve. One is medical. Inside the United States, there's basically third-party contract, which are medical agencies, and they will need to house a travel nurse or an emergency room doctor or a specialist in MRI, CT, echocardiography, and so forth, right? And the reason why they need to house them is because that hospital, that major medical institution, may have several ER doctors and quite a few nurses and, a dedicated nuclear medicine tech, right? Mm-hmm. But those people have to have a baby because they go into maternity leave and they're going to be gone, or they broke their leg while they were skiing, or they choose to go to a different hospital that might be paying them more or better suited for their family needs. So there is a vacuum or a spot, right? And that spot isn't filled instantly by most medical institutions. They'll start shopping, and they will headhunt, and they'll look for someone that has not just the credentials, but also wants to be in that area. There's a process to relocate those people. So there's typically a 3 to 6 month window where a subcontractor can serve that role. Just because the MRI tech moves on or needs maternity leave doesn't mean that you stop doing MRIs. The hospital still needs it. The ER room isn't going to close because the ER doctor, needs to go somewhere else temporarily, or, whatever. And contract law also prevents certain things from happening. Like, you can't, like, there's a process even to disengage from a specialist. So there's a whole industry around that. And my housing specialty has been and before the Airbnb model was so popular, was 13 week long is typical length of a contract for a nurse, ER nurse, or ICU, CCU, pediatrics, things like that. And the same thing for like these other specialties, that's how long the contract typically is. And what I liked about it, and why I dedicated real estate to the purpose, was it would typically be within a mile of a major hospital is the only place I would look. So it's very proximal. It would typically be residential around a hospital, and you could get things for pretty cheap by comparison to super compressed mega city, things like that has like a financial district or something along those lines. Hospitals usually aren't in those areas. And so I could acquire for fairly cheap, and I could set it up like Airbnb or VRBO to be everything that they need. And what I loved about it was, like, I have friends that specialize in student housing, and they got really crushed in 2020 and 21 as, universities closed. and they're probably going to get crushed continually because we are decentralizing even our education.
Right.
But
That's a good point.
nurses and physicians have to go where the $3 million device is that you do a test. Nurses and physicians have to go where the ICU and the CCU serves people that are in the dead and dying category. So like, you can't decentralize healthcare. Like, you can do telemedicine and check on people while they're at home, but they're still going to come in for their orthopedic appointment to get drills and screws in their leg. Like, you're not going to decentralize those things. And so I liked that. It was recession proof. As a kid, my father was a lawyer, and he would tell me, you should go into medicine. It's always recession proof. Like, people will pay through the nose to stay healthy. Like, they can always earn money again.
Right.
So that was a recession proof element of his frame. And I just carried that through into my real estate speculation. Was, let me set this all up. Let me have it as a housing play. And those did really well. I would make off of a $5,000 cost overhead for like a 3 unit type of space, I would make, 15 to 20 grand, a month. So
wow.
I had a really good ROI. And what I loved also was the contract wasn't with the individual nurse or the individual physician. It was with the agencies. So the agencies would need a year long of availability, and they would just place their nurse or place their physician there for 13 weeks and then follow up 2 or 3 weeks later with someone else. So I love that model.
Oh, man.
The second specialty that I really dedicated to was in 2014. A very good friend of mine was running the onboarding, at least, for what's called a startup accelerator in Palo Alto. It's very popular. And basically it would be, okay, you have people that they want to get venture capital money. They want to get seed angel fund money so that they could create an application, or they could create a box to talk to and engage with Amazon or engage with Google or whatever, right? Okay, Google and stuff, right? So they were either trying to look at building something hardware or something software. And one is the Bay Area, especially in that region, is very expensive for an individual to have an apartment or to have an office space, extremely expensive per square foot. And in addition to that, most of the people that are doing that, I don't want to say that we're rather slovenly in the United States, but there's quite a few of us that are just status quo. Whereas the people that are immigrants, if you look at the statistics of ROI of first generation immigrants, you're coming from somewhere that's very opportunity restrictive to somewhere that's very open on opportunity, like opportunity, right? But that doesn't mean that that person has great access to capital, because they don't have a FICO score. They don't know what Experian means. They may or may not know to set up an LLC or a sole proprietorship and get capital through those financialized systems. And yet they want to pay for 2 or 3 developers to make an app like Uber or Lyft or something like that, right? So I created with my friend, my partner also, 2014 to 2017, I had a property that I leased 1 block away from Caltrain, which is a big train system, 5 blocks away from Stanford University, which is a epicenter of like technology innovations and things like that. 2 blocks away from Steve Jobs' house, maybe 2.5 blocks or 3 blocks away from one of the co-founders of Google. So it was like the residential area of nouveau riche capitalists, where their kids want to go to school. When they're walking the sidewalks and things like that and going to the farmer's market, it's great opportunity for networking. It's great opportunity for making a pitch to get funded. So I leased the property for, I think, utilities included, which was internet and all these other things, was $7,000 per month. And then I ran it for about 3 years as a micro mayor over like 15 people housed, and 15 little office spaces in the social zone. That's what this residential property was about. So $7,000 was my overhead, and I think I was making somewhere around $28,000 or $30,000 a month.
Wow.
Basically for arbitrage.
Right? So that was that like an incubator then, where it was like a live workspace for guys that were looking to
yeah. There's still like, I don't really, every so often I'll link it on Twitter and things like that, but there's still like videos and things like that of how it was set up. And it was basically 3 bedrooms that had 4 bunk beds in each space, but they weren't just regular bunk beds. Like I actually built my childhood with my grandparents was a lot of carpentry. So I built out like dedicated, like if you see those micro hotels in Japan, it looked really nice. You know, it was like a micro cubicle of, 8 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot, rectangular space. And inside of it, they had their own internet connections and power and, all the comforts. But they were basically I modeled it after being in the Navy. You have the same thing as submarines and ships. You have berthing spaces, places to sleep, BERTH, not BIRTH. But yeah, so I built it out of that kind of stuff. And like I said, it was housing 15 or so. And the typical tenant was from Brazil, Ukraine, Belarus. They were from all over, Europe, especially Eastern Europe. And they were from South and Central America. And what does that mean? That means that their family, most likely, they were still in developed economies, but their family probably sold something to support their kid to go and immigrate temporarily or be on an O1 visa or whatever it may be to allow them to come. And then they would, try to get traction about their establishing of their network. Who do they know? Who can help them out? Establish their capital, polish their pitch, so that they could get, attraction to their idea. So like one of my tenants was a Brazilian. I think he was 22 years old, something like that. He had a chemistry degree, and he came and he wanted to make a vegan mayonnaise. Definitely not high tech, but his, the desire for egg-free mayonnaise, I didn't know that there was a big desire for it, but I think he developed the product in over like 6 to 8 months. It took another year, and I helped him get through the process, also connecting with different people and things like that to get all the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, the USDA, to get them to approve the product. And I think he exited his company for like 8 million, 9 million, something like that. So he was now a millionaire as a 23-year-old, 24-year-old. And what did he do for the next year after he exited the company? Well, he lived in a bunk bed at my accelerator trying to find new ideas and meet new co-founders for other things. Like, it's a great incubating environment that you could say, well, now I'm going to live the life of Riley. I'm going to return to my home country and be basically, very well off and, go all through the social, the material trappings of success. But like, I like that personality. That personality type is like, oh, that's great. Now I want to move to the next thing, right? And he's done very well since then. So I love being around that. Like 25 to 30 I would say actually 22 to 30-year-old is probably where you're going to be the most creative, have the most like physical energy to get things done, you be able to tolerate sleeplessness and crappy food. Like, that's when you can really make your mark. After that, like in your 30s, 40s, and 50s is mostly, for me at least, I think of it as a diplomacy role, like an ambassadorship, like being able to help these people incubate their idea and maybe grease the rails on their success. And that's really the role I like to play with cryptocurrency too.
Oh, that's remarkable. That's remarkable. Let's dig into that a little bit more. Before we do, we've got a bunch of people in the comments this morning that I want to go ahead and say what's up to. We've got Harmonic Hexakin. She's in here almost every single show. Appreciate you being in here. We got Shamrocks and Shenanigans. Good morning, gents. He's in from Seattle. Very cool. Appreciate you joining. Ruben's one of our loyal listeners. Tin Top. Good to have you guys on. Shamrock says, this is why I respect Gary so much. Everything he does is with a purpose. Very calculated. I like that. Love the timing of the stream. Perfect for my dog walk. Awesome. It's great to have more Hexkins on. Appreciate you guys being on here. Money Gang was on our show the last week, if I'm not mistaken. Appreciate Money Gang. If you guys aren't following him, make sure to go check him out. Also, if you guys aren't following Funding Jim, if what he's talking about is resonating with you, go check him out on Twitter. He's got his handle there in his profile. Some of the best content that we like, or that I like, I should say, on Twitter, Funding Jim puts out. I'm really interested, and Corey is too, in finding the people that will tell you the truth. So many people, especially out there in cryptocurrency and real estate too, They want to give you the moon math, and that's great. We all like moon math, and it gets you exciting or gets you excited. But in the end of the day, you need good, sound people that know what they're talking about to make good decisions. So very important.
Absolutely.
We got Jim Rat.
What up, Jim Rat?
What's up, Jim Rat? Appreciate you being in. Jim Rat's making a turn for the better. If you're not following Jim Rat, he's talking about quitting marijuana use on his channel.
Yeah, I like that.
That's a beautiful thing. I know Corey's talked a lot about on our show about being sober. Go ahead.
I'm a recovering alcoholic and drug addict over 3 years. So if you guys, reach out to me anytime you want to talk, need support on any kind of recovery. So
absolutely. Got Doc Lover on. Very good. Johan's on from Sweden. Very cool. Appreciate you being in. So we've got a bunch of guys here. So the next question I have for you, Funding Jim. So you're and Jeremy. Thanks, Corey. I missed Jeremy. Jeremy's in. That's Corey's brother. Appreciate Jeremy being on. Love listening to your wisdom on Twitter, Funding Jim. Absolutely. And then Jim Rat, thanks so much for sharing. It means a lot. Very good. Love seeing the jump, Jim Rat. Good for you, man. Very cool. So Funding Jim, your path that you've shared with us thus far has been extremely calculated and fairly conservative in nature, right? You go to the military, which will lead you to the medical field, which will lead you to real estate. All these types of things are what many would consider safe, right?
Yeah.
And cryptocurrency is the opposite of what many would consider safer or conservative. And so I'd love to talk about how you transitioned or ended up in that space.
The last comment is actually a pretty good segue into, I saw their thoughts on Jason Hartman's use of debt, pay it off or leverage it. So I had, my journey has taken me from very conservative prepper, all of my family and things like that. They have, materials to last through the apocalypse and off the land and things like that, right? It's very much if I own it and there's no debt claim against it from government or neighbor, then I feel better. Like I feel, but my mom feels best that the property's been paid off. My grandparents the same way. Like they don't even I don't think that my grandparents, I don't think that they financed the car in 40 years. Like they will use it for a while. Once it's paid off, maybe they'll trade it in when they have cash to go along with the actual purchase. I don't think
that's how my dad is. He's never financed anything. He's never even had a credit card. The guy's totally against it. Pay cash for everything.
Yeah. So I had that narrative instilled in me also. And it is, there's a good friend also that talks a lot on the Twitter spaces, Hex Deck, and he talks about The Richest Man in Babylon, his prosperity project.
Great book.
Yeah, great book.
Great book.
So I had that kind of mentality. Oh, I need to have it. And then even when I wouldn't even say speculate, but it's like, the narrative for me, other than just working a lot and being curious about like biology and science and things like that in my medical career, I guess in 2009, after like the real estate bubble and what was the movie that was about? 2008.
Big Short.
Yeah, The Big Short. After The Big Short, and maybe I went down a YouTube rabbit hole that led me to Mike Maloney content about gold and silver, or Miles Franklin and Andy Sheckman, and a lot of content about like this narrative of sound money. Like the idea was like, oh, okay, now that's a financial instrument and that's a metal. And it seems like if I buy that, then I'll beat the inflation monster. Like that'll be great for me. Right. So I went down that road in 2010, I think, and 11. And I was living super conservatively. I dated and things like that, but I didn't have any other overheads. Like my housing and things like that didn't have a cost. I was earning, as far as selling of my time, 2 different hospitals, basically all of my days were full, both on weekdays and weekends.
And at that point, had you taken leverage to purchase real estate, or had you stuck to just like paying cash?
In 2010 and 11, I had my own home, but that was it.
Okay.
I had my own home that I had segregated to be part of my own home was rental. So like I didn't have an overhead cost of my mortgage, although I had a mortgage. I think I was still making like $7 or $8 grand a month, and my mortgage was like 4,200. So I even had a cushion off of my housing cost.
Oh, wow.
But I was earning somewhere around 400,000 per year, working, just selling time, interested in science, interested in biology, interested in as much financial cushion as I could in case, I had injury or illness or something. So like I always had that fear narrative about like, can someone take this away from me because I'm not earning a cash flow? Like I always had that fear narrative. And that was programmed into me really from my youth. However, metals and things like that, like there's different commentary. You can go down a different road about whether that's an insurance policy, and you say, okay, in insurance, like George Gammon likes to make the frame that it's an insurance policy. It's not about the ROI on your purchasing power, even on the storage of your purchasing power. If you look at actual charts, that isn't true. Like you even buying silver and gold in 2010, 11 years ago, 12 years ago, was I think $31 to $32 spot, plus a premium of about $3 to $4, plus shipping, for a 500-ounce monster box, and then bury it like a pirate, in concrete somewhere, and maybe you'll break it out in some kind of high need, right? I was like, oh, this will be my pirate treasure kind of thing, and I did that. Like I went through that whole process.
Fun.
Yeah. And I sat there for like 10 years. Every so often I'd remember and look at the chart and like, oh shit, like it's really not performing as an investment class, right? And then I'd go down occasionally these chats to say, well, it's suppressed or it's leveraged or the CME or 250 ounces of paper versus 1 ounce of real, and what's the industrial need, and look at all the silver that gets thrown into electronics that are later thrown away and never stripped out again. Like I went down all those rabbit holes, and the truth has to hit you in the face sooner or later. I'm like,
right.
Sound money is sound money, whatever you want to call that, sound money. But when I discovered cryptocurrency was 2017, like a lot of people, you hear hype about ICOs and ROI, but the first thing you're introduced to really might be Bitcoin. At least it was for me. And coincidentally, because I was in the startup world and in real estate in San Francisco, the first event that I went to was in Santa Monica. A friend of mine that was a previous tenant was interested in cryptocurrency, and he invited me, and I went. And the event was the first, blockchain crypto kind of event in Santa Monica that had been held. And I met, Vinny from Civic. He's the founder of Civic and some other things. I forgot his last name. Mashinsky was at a card table, and I talked with him for a bit about his pitch of, Celsius and his avatars of, hip kids and cartoons, playing with crypto. So like I heard all the pitches, and they were interesting. I was like, oh, this is a startup world. It just happens to deal with this cryptographic thing that is trying to marry into the sound money narrative. Like there's only a certain amount, it's a scarce supply. The team is going to hold back this percentage, and then we're going to release this product that, Internet of Things, and everything's super connected. Like I heard all those narratives, but, and I speculated. And the speculation led to the other topic you wanted to talk about, which was taxation. Was in California when I was selling my time in a high earner role, high per hour kind of earner role, and selling all my hours, 400,000+ per year was net around 200,000, around half, right? Because you're paying federal and you're paying state, which California is 10% income tax. And then on top of that, you have housing. I mean, even if you don't go into your housing costs and other overheads of basically cost of living, you just really get whacked, and you're penalized for earning more as a W-2 earner. And I was a W-2 earner, right? And you would learn about, oh, there's depreciation in real estate. Oh, there's other ways that it can be more beneficial to be leveraged, right? Even running a small business and having a leased vehicle would be better than my paid off beater kind of vehicle. Like there's different structures to why you would do certain things. especially in high tax environments. So like I went down that path with crypto, and I thought more about the tax structure. So when 17, I had put 100 grand into a project, and I had based my bet on it's compliant. It's based in the United States. The founder has this history with a Fortune 10 company. Like I tried to ground it in like regulation and say, oh, okay, they're going to be compliant. Like they're going to have the gravitas.
I mean, that makes sense. I can see how that's like a very reasonable thought process. How did that go?
Initially went great. Initially, the 100 grand speculation, along with my participation and being public about it and things like that, wasn't so much about onboarding. It was just like, oh, I'm putting a voice and a face to this, making this thing popular. 100 grand became around $1 million within 5 months. And it was, again, close to the blow off top of ICO craze in 17. And so as like October of 17 was coming around, I realized now I'm going to have to pay a lot of taxes if I sell in 2017. So let me wait at least until January so that I can roll it over into 18's tax year. That was my first thought. And then I was like, well, it actually is enough to where I probably should relocate and move to Texas, because Texas didn't have the same tax structure as California. Like, oh, okay, I should move to Texas. And I told my mom, family, and things like that. They're all happy I was going to come back to the roost, so to speak. And I was there for about 3 or 4 weeks before, I think it was Peter Schiff on the Rogan show, or maybe it was some stuff about Brock Pierce going to launch a bank in Puerto Rico, and all the crypto stuff that was going on there with EOS. I was like, and I learned enough about it that I made friends with people that were streamers in Los Angeles through their YouTube channel, and invited them. And all 5 of us went to Puerto Rico to explore this idea of capital gains being zero, the different acts that the island territory is able to offer to residents because they have sovereign power and their relationship against federal government. So like there's a whole thing about taxation that was interesting to me enough to relocate and reposition in Puerto Rico. And I've been in Puerto Rico from 2018 until just recently. Like I may not complete this tax year in Puerto Rico because I'm looking at other nations and things like that.
He's telling the truth. I was there.
Yeah, Kinman's here. Oh, Kinman's a really good friend. He found me on when my YouTube content used to only be about leverage and credit and business credit and things like that. So yeah, good to see Kinman. Kinman's a terrific guy. He's incredibly successful with affiliate marketing and things like that. We've been friends 7 or 8 years now.
Okay, good to have you on, Kinman. PulseTube says that they're liking the content too. Great work with the streams, guys. You're killing it. Yeah, appreciate you being on. So talk a little bit about, we need to wrap the show up in about 9 minutes. We've got a hard stop then. So let's Corey, unless you have something that's like just burning in your brain, I'd love to talk a little bit more about Puerto Rico, if that's all right.
Yeah, and also obviously we would want to know how you found Richard Hart and got in the hex. And
in fact, let's do that. That would be, I'm more interested in that, and we can always circle back to. We can do another show where we talk about Puerto Rico and some of the things there. How about?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. Like 17 led into 18. 18, because of the tax structure, I decided to move to Puerto Rico. It was going to save me around $400,000 in capital gains taxes and so forth to do so. So I relocated to Puerto Rico because I felt like I was so smart and validated and things like that by discovering this thing. I got ahead of myself, and I took the tax savings and put it right back into the same product, the same company, the same crypto project. And there's all kinds of terrible things that the CEO did. I'm not going to get into the weeds about it, but they just harmed not just the project, but the investor pool. I watched that money all evaporate, basically. So I put back 450,000, I think, back into the same project, saying to myself in 18, I'm just buying the dip, I'm buying the dip. But there was all kinds of terrible things about, their project that I didn't know about until later.
What would you have done differently? There's a lot of people on stream that, you see it all the time on Twitter. Oh, we're buying the dip again. We're buying the dip. how would have, and just maybe like in 2 minutes, what would you have done differently in that situation that you found yourself in?
I would have chosen a better founder. The founder wasn't that they did bad things necessarily. It was just they weren't strong natured. Like I have to be truthful in this. Most of the products or projects that have succeeded were because they expected very high standards. Like I met Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs, a lot of people like to popularize as like some Svengali kind of god or whatever, but he was actually an asshole. He was a terrible.
I've heard that.
Before.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah, I've met him personally, and I mean, again, engaging in a diplomatic kind of way is not that much stress or anything like that. But it's like most of the people that have worked underneath him in any degree, they were very high standard, very work ethic, strong natured people, but they would still say the same thing about expecting high things. And so I would just say, like, Richard did really great with his gladiatorial, public debate stuff that he did in online content, and that got the eyeballs. And then the things that people either gravitated to early on were the underdog story, like, this hated personality that's disrupting cryptocurrency and with his truth bombs. Like that was a certain thing that was attractive to watch. And then, like you were saying something about what I do differently is, especially in a field that is very speculative like cryptocurrency, you don't have to bet the farm. Like you don't have to put not just your emotional equity at risk and say, what if this doesn't work out? What am I going to do? I'm going to live on the street. Like, what are you going to do? Right. So you don't have to have that much risk really in this game when you're talking the potential of hundreds or thousands of X. Like when you're looking at real estate, you're making 7 to 10% and you're happy with that. Like, you're keeping ahead of inflation. You're able to depreciate. You can pull out equity. If the market is strong during cycles, you have wealth cycles. You can look at different asset classes. Like there's different reasons that 7 to 10% cap rate is pretty darn nice. Mm-hmm. So it's just a different of your frame about pragmatism versus risk on actual speculation. So in this crypto thing, someone has $1,000 in PulseChain or PulseX and it goes 1,000x. I mean, where else are you going to find anything like that?
There's nowhere.
And these aren't impossibles. Like you can look at, we always like to highlight on the chart where you sit at in different projects. Like here's what the ROI was from either its all-time low or all-time high, or here's where it was on launch, and here's what they tend to do, is because until there's price discovery in the marketplace to normalize something, right? Like you can probably look within minutes on MLS and see, hey, this house in this zip code is worth this when it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Like you have a really good gauge of that. But why? It's because other people set that price, within the past 6 months. Yep. Like, this is what a bank will lend against it. That gives you confidence. This is what the market seems to buy it at as a price. Here, there's all kinds of reasons that you go through a pragmatic analysis about the real estate. And it's a similar, like you don't know price discovery on, something that gives you a VPN and is attached to an ERC20. You don't know what that does. You don't know the market appetite or anything. So initially, especially, people overvaluate because they're enthusiastic and they're FOMO in. And then, if there is a lull period, then instantly the emotion takes over because you don't have any reference point, right? So I like Richard Heart's products because they are not really inventing a new thing that's called a wheel. Like, you've never seen the wheel before. No, this is a wheel that is more round, more solid, more, he adds characteristics to something that's already a known concept, like it has worked out in other legacy fields too.
Yeah. Right. Like the dollar.
Yeah.
In many ways.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up the show today. We'll do a follow-up show. We can do this. I feel this way every time. We can do this for hours. So speculate for us, Funding Jim. What are your give us a range of price appreciation expectations? Once again, nothing here is financial advice. It's just for fun. But what do you expect out of Pulse Chain and PulseX in their first market cycle?
Well, there's always like out of 100 people, who's going to cross the line first? It's kind of like, you can reach the all-time high and say that, Bitcoin hit 20,000, but how many people actually crossed the line at 20,000 and exited?
Not very many.
Right. Or how many people bought a dip because they set their limit order so darn low that it's unnatural to get down that far.
Or had the courage to pull the trigger because they're thinking it's dead project now, right?
Yeah,
and that happened. You see it all the time. You see it all the time. I mean, in 16, 17, it was always, China FUD or whatever it might be, or Koreans are not going to be able to buy or something like that, right? The government's cracking down, and I hear the narratives all the time, and when we're out talking to other real estate investors, and that's why they don't want to get involved, because of those type of objections. They're just like, it's funny.
Yeah, I mean, again, so like price performance, I think it can do what has been thought about. If Bitcoin has had its 7 million based on its narrative, and it's had to hit different pockets of money over its 13 or 14 years of history, first off, it probably tapped. It's just a replacement for dollar, and it's a way that we can trade amongst ourselves, like the peer-to-peer cash narrative. Like, you don't buy dollar bills and sit on top of them expecting that you're going to have increased purchasing power, right? But that was the peer-to-peer cash narrative for Bitcoin. And then once price speculation got involved, because there's only 21 million that's going to exist. Well, nobody ever does the math to say 21 million times 100 million. How many is that? Well, it's more than the grains of sand on the earth. Like, there's more Satoshis than there's sand. So stuff like that. Like, we related in a narrative, and the narrative triggers emotion, and the emotion makes us participate when it's others would say that's foolish. It's our psychology. So, like, what can Pulse Chain do? I think it can definitely do, above the 10,000 mark. What can PulseX do? I think it can definitely do above the 10,000 mark. Does that mean that when you see the price basically double and your 10 grand becomes 20 grand, does that mean that you're going to wait 10,000? No.
Yeah.
A lot of people won't. Like, a majority of people won't. Even if they say, I'm going to take, some of that casino money off the table and I'm going to put it in my pocket. If people stay in the casino, they tend to lose it. Like,
right. And to clarify, do you think that they have the price potential to do a 10,000x in the first cycle, like up through 2025? If that's going to be the relative top?
Me personally, again, everyone wants to have the caveat of a financial advice. Me personally, I am thinking of 3 layers of why this may be Super Bowl territory. And I say that because the presidential election, the Fed policy, and the Bitcoin halving as a reference point, very similar to why do people look at charts in the first place and try to make shapes out of what they see? Because they're like, oh, this is a bull flag, this is a bear flag, this is a trap, this is a head and shoulders.
Right.
Like, if more people are looking at charts, the charts tend to be self-fulfilling prophecies, because more people are looking at the charts. And if more people are talking about the presidential election and the fact that, inflation, like you even said something earlier, and it needs to speak to our age and our history, is my mom was thrilled with me when I was 20 years old and I was able to get a 30-year fixed mortgage at 8.5%. She's like, that's so cheap. That's crazy cheap. Because when she was financing her house, not that much, earlier than me, it was like 12.5%. And she went through the inflation of the 70s. Like, it's not possible until it's here. And then once it's here, it becomes normalized, and then you move on. Like, that's just our thing about it's too expensive. The government can't print more money. Yeah, they can. Of course they can.
Right.
Of course they can.
I don't think that there's going to be blood in the streets and social unrest and things like that until people lose calorie or life. Like, if they are starving or they're harmed and physically harmed, I mean, you don't see eruptions like that. So, like, it is what it is until it's not.
Sure.
Dane, if you got to go, I can continue on with him for a little bit longer and wind it down.
Let's do that. I got to jump off. Once again, appreciate all you guys jumping on, and thank you, Funding Jim.
One thing before you hop off, Dane, that I want to touch on that he said is that you know, we always talk about how heavy it is to lift up Pulse Chain and Pulse X because it's so economically heavy. But he just kind of light bulb went on. As this lifting up, the heaviness is going to be being offset by everyone selling their bags into new money. It's good. You're going to see that because no one staked out for 5555 in Pulse Chain and Pulse X. So that's lifting off the ground. That money's flowing out because people, like he said, who's going to experience 1,000x? Who's going to experience 100x? Who's going to experience a 20x? You know what I mean? People are going to be selling up. They're going to be excited. They're coming out of a bear market. Oh, I got a 10x. I put $100,000 in. That's $1 million. Boom. Right. And they're exiting. And so that allows it to lift off the ground more, in my opinion.
That's
so,
interesting.
I don't know.
We'll have to
If you
talk
take
more
1,000
about that.
people, if you take 1,000 people, there are some of those people that are irrational, and it only takes one irrational person to move
a
the
lot
price on something that is based on market cap. So, like, even when you say, "Oh, look, it's gone higher than it ever would be expected to do," because one irrational person says, "Yeah, I'll throw another 1,000 at it." Sure, like
right.
And then they end up chasing each other. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
fun,
Anyway.
fun stuff. So go ahead and go, Dane.
Okay.
I'll wind
Yeah,
it
I'll
down
jump off.
with
Thanks, Funding Jim.
Gary here, and so
All good, all good.
yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you need to wrap up, that's all fine. I have other things to do too.
let's touch on one thing. I just want to ask one question before we hop off? Would you say it was worth it to move to Puerto Rico, to go through all the rigmarole that you went through, to do that, to offset some of those gains, obviously? For someone like ourselves, we're going to actually be in Puerto Rico in 3 weeks for a mastermind. We should hook up if you're there. I don't know if you're there or not. But would you say that it's worth going down that rabbit hole, doing this, and is the quality of life? That's what I'm really concerned about. Is it worth offsetting those gains? Was it worth the trade?
My bias on the answer to that is the fact that I'm a single guy. I don't have kids that are going to schools.
Yeah.
I'm more comfortable in adapting to a new environment or new culture. I've lived in 40 or 50 countries at least, you know, and hundreds of cities. And I've always had like that, you know, I'm going to be here for 3 months and on a contract and go to a different place. I've always had that in my background, you know, military or whatever as well. So like my bias is partly about the comfort I would have in adapting. And the other bias that on my answer is, you know, if you have a windfall in speculating and your windfall is 1,000x your $1,000, now you've got $1 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what are you going to do with it? Like, what is your plan? You want to drive a nice car? Do you want to live in a house that's fully paid off in, you know, Central America, middle USA? Like a $300,000 house in Tennessee is quite nice.
It is.
$300,000 house in California is pretty much a dumpster.
Check.
You are living on the street at 300 grand. So like, it depends. Like, what is it you want? And I've had over the years, especially with Hex and the ROI that Hex has had, quite a few people that have relocated to Puerto Rico. The same reason that I did was for ongoing benefit of capital gains appreciation not being taxed. If you are running an e-commerce company of some sort, you're selling services and goods to anyone other than Puerto Rico, and you already are doing a business that's not related to speculation in crypto, it's probably the best place to set up for sure, because you're exporting services and goods, and you can use telemedicine as a psychologist and have clients in California, but you're living in Puerto Rico and your total income tax is under 4%. You know, so like, that's amazing. If you're going to try to snowball your earnings into other things to speculate, like real estate. If you're going to run a property management company, and basically you have a portfolio of real estate in other places in the world, or especially in the United States, and you want to funnel that through an LLC in Puerto Rico, there's amazing reasons to do that, right? Property management reasons, it's very worthwhile. However, if you are thinking that in my view, if you're thinking that you're going to have the stability and low anxiety life that you might have now, you've just 10x'd your cash flow, or you've 10x'd your wealth in wherever you're at in the world, in the US especially, and you think that you're going to have lower anxiety moving to a Caribbean island that has challenges with its electrical grid, challenges with its stability of internet, challenges with natural events like hurricanes, challenges to your sense of anxiety in communicating because the majority of the island only speaks Spanish, challenges with your sense of promptness or accountability. Island time is a real thing. Challenges if you don't like the DMV and you suffer through it for a couple of hours wherever you're at, make that into 3 days. Like, it depends on what your sense of I've made it because I have ROI on my capital gain speculation and I have the benefit of low taxation, but you're going to have challenges that are a trade-off. So for me, I've been there since 2018 until, like I said, depending on Pulse Chain's launch and if that happens prior to May or prior to June, if it happens prior to June, then I may continue another year in Puerto Rico.
Mid-May.
Looking at myself exiting to something like St. Kitts or other places. It depends. Just because it depends on the culture you're living in. So I've advised a lot of people to stay where they're at. Like, they already know where they're going to get their car repaired when they have a problem with their car in Scottsdale, Arizona. They already know where they're going to, they already have their friends and family that can come visit them as they enjoy their windfall and speculation. They just there's other ways that you can structure your taxes to be, 9 to 12% and stay where you're at. Like, it depends on what you want to do. Like how many machinations you want to go through in order to keep your yield.
Yeah, very interesting. And you hit on something strong there. It's like, because you're single, you're used to moving around. I'm married. I have an 18-month-old daughter. Not sure if it's a most ideal situation to be dragging her to Puerto Rico because Papa wants to save on some tax money, right? It's like, is that fair to her? And so it's just a lot of things to consider. But
well, that's something to talk to are people like RG3. RG3 is he investigated. He came to the island. He did it. Met with the lawyers, and he's got kids and family and a nice place in California, and he suffers, to me, a lot of cost that's unnecessary.
Right.
But it's also where he knows all of his social circle, and his wife has a lot of fabric and connection. And so and he wanted to have a surfing life in his 50s, but it's not worth it to them to do it. The same thing with you can speak to Big Kurkowski. Big Kurkowski relocated, but he also had a different company that made it worthwhile for him to come in addition to crypto speculation.
Yeah.
And his family is very young and his wife's very adaptable. And so they, there's different examples inside of our community of people that have gone through the process.
Randy Holarski
versus no, it's not.
Yeah. So, well, cool, man. I am forever grateful for you coming on today, man. This has just been an awesome interview. Would love to have you back on, especially as the FOMO kind of comes back in the community with V3 coming out. And then obviously with launch of Pulse Chain, I think we're going to be really buzzing around all of Twitter and everything else, YouTube. And so would love to have you back on then, man. It's been absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for being here today. And anything you want to shill right now would be great. Let them know where they can find you and anything else to, just give you some followings, man.
I appreciate it. Yeah. So a couple of things is I have my Rebel Capitalist shirt on right now.
I like it.
Yeah. This is George Gammon's event that he started putting together about 2 years ago now, I think. And became friends with him first online because of the launch of his show was about the same time as the AA and Hex. So I've said that before. So I engage people through YouTube commentary, like a lot of people participate here. And you can build a familiarity that you recognize those names over time as a content creator, and it becomes familiar. And because of that familiarity, you have a beginnings of a network. So meeting George in 2000, I don't know what year, in person, 2 years ago or whatever, that led to Jason Hartman that we talked about earlier. And that led to, and Ken McElroy and Robert Kiyosaki all at George's events, which were Rebel Capitalist. And I decided, instead of buying something luxury, that I, even as far as real estate, even, that I would put the money, some capital towards Mastermind. So the Mastermind that I joined, I was one of the founding members of George, Jason, and Ken created something called the Collective Advisors. And basically it is a social environment. So if you're going to join a golf club, golf course, whatever they call those, you're going to pay dues. You're going to go play golf. You're going to socialize with people. And either you're going to do that for productive reasons, like I want to build network and access, and I want to, find the deals and find partners and things like that. Like that's why you would join a social club. And this is a new version of it. So I like what they do. I like how they form. And if you're going to level up, like you talked a lot about masterminds, I think it's worthwhile. It depends on your stage and what your real ambition is, though. Like I think you need to make use of the network by delivering value to the network. Like I help them and they help me. Like I think it's very worthwhile, but other people can do different things. So the things I shill typically are, I love the HEX contract. I love the idea behind a L1 of the project of Pulse Chain and the DEX. I love the idea of hopefully it's finalized as far as PulseX, meaning immutable. It may have to shift liquidity if there's a V3 in the future or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I like those finalized things that people can just engage with and participate without any risk of shutdown. So I love the crypto elements that stick to those first principles. But outside of that, it doesn't really matter if you don't have social networks, social like George's events and so forth. So that's the only thing I shill is those three things. Awesome.
Cool, man. I'm going to be looking into that. Yeah, I'm a big advocate of masterminds. I've been in a bunch of them. Boardroom, 7-figure wholesaling mastermind, 7-figure syndicate, a bunch of different masterminds. And I love it, man. I contribute all my success to it because I get around people like yourself who are playing at a higher level, and it forces me to raise up and play at a higher level. And not just in the financial part of my life, because I live by 4 pillars: spiritual, mental, physical, and then financial. But if you get the first 3, in my opinion, right, and you're leveling up in those areas, the 4th one will come with it. So it's, that's awesome. I'm going to look into it myself because I would love to be around you guys. But thank you, Funding Jim. I appreciate you so much today. So let's follow up maybe around when V3 launches. Hopefully we get a launch here in the next week or 2, or maybe 3. We'll see. A lot of updates have been happening, which has been exciting. And so, yeah, man, we'll talk to you soon. All right. Have a good day, everyone. Thanks.